Welcome to another episode of the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. Aaron, welcome back.
We're here.
We're here to basically for round two of the executive order around strengthening customs enforcement. But I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, and so I'm going to let you kick it off. You're going to be a little bit more of the host with the questions, I think, today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where, Clint, I actually know you have the most thoughts on this, which is why I'm going to ask the questions. In fact, you had so many thoughts that you decided to write an article about it. So I'd love to kind of dive into that and unpack it. And it's crazy where we're going. Like this has been out a couple months already. I think it was back in June. And things are moving fast. I know CBP had some mandates in there on things they had to do, and they're starting to take steps to enforce the border. And I look at it, I'm like, holy cow, it's almost Halloween season, right?
Yeah, it's close.
And in fact, I often like to throw a party at a haunted house. Do you know why?
Why?
Because the ghosts bring all the booze.
Boo. Okay.
All right. And on that bad joke, let's pivot then. So Clint, you wrote an open letter, really, and it's titled "A Reckoning is Coming," and that's tied back to that executive order and really a response or reaction to that. Correct?
Yep.
And what I found interesting as I read this is lots of really interesting things in here. But as I get down to the bottom of it, towards the end, there's a quote in here that I find a little different than what you'd expect from a customs enforcement executive order to a titled article that says a reckoning is coming. And this quote is, "For the honest, this is the best news in 1,000 years." What do you mean by that?
So think about how long this has been a problem for customs just to deal with, from the days of the Silk Road, trying to enforce what's coming through the border and the amount of fraud and bad actors and everything that's going in through there. But you also have good actors. But how do you know, right? So you're doing inspections, even on the good actors, and then trying to find ways to solve this problem. It's always been difficult for CBP, and we hear this from them directly. They want to know who's good, so they can focus on who's bad.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the trade is good.
But what do they, I completely agree. What do they have to work with to know who's good?
Not a lot. I mean, some things, right? There's some signals, right? It could be they are familiar with, it could be the shipper on that. It could be the importer of record. It could be, the broker, right? They have signals that they can look for sure. And then there's some things that are kind of missing. And so what's been hard is, and this is why the executive order came out, is when it is a bad actor, how do you hold them accountable? And so what was going on? What were the bad actors doing, Aaron?
Well, if you think specifically about the executive order, it was
the executive
targeting importer of record.
Right.
In the U.S., a lot of people could be importer of record without much substance here in the U.S.
What kind of people could be importer of record?
Anybody, any foreign entity.
Foreign entity.
There could be. It'd be really easy for someone to kind of spin up a shell company of sorts, act as the importer of record, and then when CBP comes calling to enforce, they disappear. They become like those ghosts that are bringing all the booze to the party. I even brought that joke
You did.
That
was good.
Wasn't that amazing? Yeah, and so look, the rules of the game are changing, but honestly, the environment's been changing.
Yeah.
And it has. I kind of go back to your quote that I quoted earlier of best news in 1,000 years. I actually think this is all really important to even go back to the history of trade, and you touched on it a little bit, but specifically, we live in the low value e-commerce world.
Yep.
And can you just give us a little history lesson here and kind of like what led us up to this point, and maybe even tie in some specifics around low value e-commerce?
So think, late 2000s and e-commerce starts booming, right? And there's all this volume. And customs hasn't had a great way to deal with small parcels. And so some countries has had like de minimis in place. Even the US had a de minimis. It was $250. But that was still, there was way too much volume for customs to deal with at $250. So I think it was 2016, right, is when the Barack Obama changed it to $800 on the de minimis.
And in fact, you wrote a letter at that point in time too.
I did.
What was your opinion then? Do you remember?
I do. I thought it was a mistake for a lot of different reasons. Mostly, I definitely understand the overwhelming side for the government to deal with the packages. Where it was a mistake is neighbors, right, to the U.S. didn't have a de minimis that high, and the vast majority of the world didn't have a de minimis that high. And it made it very difficult for U.S. businesses to compete with foreign entities. And then we saw, I won't say I was right, but, we saw how a lot of this played out over the coming years for U.S. companies is you could just park your warehouse on the border in Canada or in Mexico. And so instead of, let's say you warehouse in Texas versus warehouse in Mexico, just like miles apart. The difference is how much are the tariffs if you warehouse in Texas?
Whatever the tariffs are on all of your goods.
Why?
Because you're bringing in larger, more expensive imports.
It's over the $800 de minimis. Mm-hmm. If you bring in that same container, but house it in Mexico.
And then you only ship individual orders across the border.
Shipments. What's the value of each one of those shipments?
Less than $800.
Less than $800. What's the duty on that?
Zero.
And so this caused that's one type of problem. The other thing is China could then just bring in a plane load of goods and kind of get the same effect by keeping a warehouse in China, right? The Temus and the Shein. And it wasn't just about the tariffs. That's not what this is all about. It was about being able to know what's in the package, right? Like they don't have visibility. So I think all this problem, this exploded, right? This goes back to what you were asking earlier is the reason that this came into play is there was so much volume, you couldn't see it. And then they had to figure out, okay, crap, this is causing all sorts of problems because now I have foreign entities that I don't know who they are. And let's say they're skirting tariffs or other bad behavior. And then customs wants to go after this import of record. And it's like ABC company, with a bad phone number. And they're not getting any money. And their bond, they have the smallest bond possible. But CBP would be left holding the bag and a bad actor they spin up another shell company.
Yeah.
This is not just the US. Europe is trying to solve the same problem. Everywhere around the world wants to solve this problem. How this was solved, though, is when and this was the executive order, they wanted to put this on a actual person inside the United States that's a citizen or a real business with assets in the US, right? So they need somebody to go after and hold accountable. And this is has all sorts of consequences in how the executive order and what it talks about and what it's going to punish and all this. But back to why is this good for the good actors out there is it's going to create clarity. If you were let's talk about a good actor. Let's go non-e-commerce, then we can kind of go to e-commerce. You're bringing in a container. I was doing this, not for just funny Halloween costumes, actually. So we're bringing in a shipment of Halloween costumes and some other things for a small family business, and had some pool pump stuff. Anyway, the broker I was working with, who will not be named because it's not the broker that we purchased, said, this is what the new tariffs had come out. This was a little over a year ago, and he was panicking and he called me. He's like, whoa. He's like, dude, you have all these new tariffs. He's like, so we need to change the value on the shipment. And I'm like, we need to what? And he's like, yeah. So can we, if we just change the value, then we can save on your tariffs. And he's like, can we just change it? He's like, what do you want me to change it to? And I'm like, you don't change it. This is a broker.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, so he doesn't change it, and the guy changes the harmonized code anyway to try. He's doing me a favor. Changes the harmonized code anyway on the freaking entry to save me on tariffs. And you know what ended up happening? Customs ended up changing it later, And then I ended up paying, of course, the difference. I'm just like, what are you doing? And so these are the type of situations when I'm a good actor, I'm paying my full tariff on the goods. And I know that competitors possibly are not, right? If they're working with, this guy, I already know how he's been operating. And now if I know, if people know, you have to be an entity here. And in this case, I don't know if maybe they could have been, but if he had to be the import of record and his business was on the line, this might have been...
He might have handled that situation a little differently if he had a little more skin in the game.
Okay, but let's say he didn't, right? What happened this week? What do we hear? What's the rumor? Yeah, what's on the rumor mill, Aaron?
We know of a broker just this week that got shut down.
That was doing type 11 entries, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to say necessarily why, but we could be general.
It is in general. There's some weird patterns with tariffs that we're no longer applying. Those kind of things that, and what happened was there was a part of their book of business that was not very compliant, and another part of their business got affected. Yeah, and now that other part of business that is compliant is now scrambling to find a new broker.
So this puts shippers in a big dilemma, right? Before, you really probably didn't think that hard about who was brokering the shipments. You're probably looking to save on price, and now all of a sudden you're scrambling to get your shipments cleared because your broker wasn't really doing reasonable care. And it's hard to, at scale, in this low e-commerce environment. We have come at it with a very interesting perspective because we know and understand extremely well what's happening on the other side of the pond, right? Like with where they're selling on the platforms, how e-commerce transactions work, what kind of data is accessible. So we just have a different viewpoint on it, kind of coming into brokerage. But as things start to clamp down, if your competitor is doing B2B to C, which by the way is most of the time, I would say, BS B2C, like there's a few cases where you can legitimately do B2B to C. One thing that they were doing on that is they would just tell, and this is how you know that it was all messed up. They would just tell the foreign entity, let's just spin you up a little entity in Wyoming, right? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be, we're just going to, that's B2B, that's your B2B in the US. This executive order is going after people like that. So if you've been hearing, things in your overseas about trying to save on tariffs, when you're trying to do that, the US and other countries are going to try to find mechanisms. And the linchpin in this was putting the onus on a business or a person. And then it goes through all the punishments and things it's going to punish.
When you actually have accountability,
yep, and
someone has a reason to want to be compliant, yep, versus someone that says, yeah, well, I'm outside the law. I'm a foreign importer of record. Good luck coming after me. And they can shut down and spin up another entity overnight. And in fact, from what I understand, there's a lot of them that just have multiple entities all ready to go, and they just they just close down one, move to the next. But as I listen to the story, I also think about the why and how we got here, and how it's actually, especially in e-commerce, this is a new world that we're entering globally, not just in the US. And there's a tendency to want to say, well, it's always been done this way, or this is how someone else is doing it, and it's always worked. The rules of the game are changing, and part of that is if you go back to the de minimis across the world, and the U.S. raising theirs on low value shipments, they just chose to ignore them. That's what the de minimis is. It's like, I'm not going to worry about it because there's a whole bunch of operational problems and things like. These aren't that big of a piece of the pie. Let's just ignore them. Well, then all of a sudden, security and compliance, issues started arising in that lane because it got exploited. Now they're saying, okay, how do we deal with that? And that's where I think it now springboards in. Europe's getting rid of their de minimis. There's a ton of countries talking about it. U.S. got rid of their de minimis. And if you look at this, now they're saying, who's going to be responsible to make sure all of these low-value shipments are compliant? They want someone to hold accountable. Yep. Which is the importer of record.
Importer of record, who is a U.S. business, most likely, or it's a company that has assets, or it's a person. So now what's the I want to talk a little bit about what this punishes, because like in the executive order, maybe you have something else you want to get to first.
I actually want to touch on why this all sounds super negative. But why is that a good thing? If you're a legitimate U.S. business trying to run your business above board, hallelujah.
Yeah,
because you've been competing
against
BS
for sure
for years.
Yep.
And now you can finally compete on a fair playing field.
And there's a lot of honest foreign sellers.
Absolutely.
And sometimes there's in different regions, right? There's some behaviors sometimes that are different and not as honest. And in other regions, they're super honest. And they're competing against another region overseas too, shipping to the U.S. They have U.S. customers. This is great for them, right? You're an Australian business or Canadian business, and you've been doing it right. Like this will, in the end, can end up really, really good for you. And the ones that are going to scream the loudest are the ones that were not so honest. And so they're going to try to find ways to change the tariff and whatever. And then CBP is going to notice they're going to shut down the brokerage, right? Like which we've seen. And then because that broker is the IOR. And eventually, right, this is going to weed things out. But it started with, yes, the having someone to hold accountable. Now, can we get to...
Let's do it.
All right. So what does this punish? Punishes misrepresentation. So that's undervaluation especially, right? But changing, again, the description, anything like that, you're going to get smacked, right? We talked about the shell companies. Sellers, you need to be able to produce the export paperwork. They're going to build a registry they're really trying to clean up the whole registry of importer of records. And so it's going to build that up, but then there's going to be penalty floors. So these penalties, man, there's been some crazy stuff. So like negligence can be like 2x the duty cost, gross negligence, 4x. Broker misconduct is like, $30K. In 2013, there were pharmacy parcels like coming through with UPS, and there was $40 million was the fine. And then CBP went after FedEx in 2014. They were criminally indicted. It's $1.6 billion. I think this one was also around pharmaceuticals. FedEx ended up winning and had to go to trial. And so it's not that they were actually like purposely, it doesn't even sometimes matter. Even if you're saying you're doing your best, isn't good enough. And this is now the situation the brokers are in.
Well, and what you can't do is say you're doing your best while you have your hands over your eyes too. That doesn't work.
No, I'm doing my best. And why should I have to know and prove that they sold it at this price on that platform? And here's why. This is a technology problem. This is not a clearance problem. I'm sorry, if it's a technology problem, then it can be solved, right? Go solve the problem. You need to know what happened. So the executive order doesn't call out specifically what you need to do. It doesn't need to. So if you read what the punishments are, it's easy to conclude what then you have to do to meet that bar. Okay, Aaron, in order to avoid undervaluation, someone lying on the undervaluation, how can you try to avoid that? What are some ways?
Well, I can tell you actually how I've seen it work.
How do they do it today?
I've seen it because we are involved in a lot of different international transactions over the years. But if there's a odd looking valuation, I've seen a manual outreach from the broker to say, hey, I need a receipt on this transaction. And they give it
and who are they outreaching to?
It's often the person that bought it. Because they got a receipt from whoever they bought it from.
And they don't have a connection with the person that sold it.
Exactly. Yep. And so it's a painful process. And then they'll get a receipt. And if it doesn't match, then they actually update the entry to
what if they don't get the receipt? What do they do with that package? If
it'll often, it gets held.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's called caging, right? So they'll cage things because it's missing information. And so this is how. Okay, now, how could this be done at scale?
Well, that's a great question. Let's think about and this is where I'm going to narrow it down to the e-commerce space right now.
Yes.
If I go to buy something online, there's a lot of information given to me when I buy, correct?
Yeah.
On the website when I buy, I know how much I bought it for. I have to put in my payment method. I get an invoice emailed to me. All this information's there.
Did you have a coupon? Did you get a discount?
There's all sort. Exactly. There's a ton of
get one
details.
free.
But guess what? There's a ton of technology on that side of it.
Yeah.
And it's all there available to be used, but no one's using it. And then if I look at what's actually put on a commercial invoice and presented to a broker to clear at customs, it's like a 3-word description.
Yeah.
And a value that who knows if it matches that transaction or not.
Yeah. And so this is drift, right? That occurs from the time of order to the time of declaration, right? When they create the shipment.
Yep.
And so what the broker sees, they're blind to what happens on the order, and they don't even consider the fact that maybe I should know, but this is basically forcing it. You need to know who that foreign seller is. So when you sign up a business, you should let's say that you're a broker in the US and you sign up, you're doing shipments for this, kind of, it's not a brand, right? Let's say it's for a shipping company or something, a consolidator. If you don't have a connection to that consolidator's customer base in any way, or a knowledge of them, or being able to do, or they're not doing a certain amount of vetting, and you can't prove, right, what you need, because you're acting, when you're the importer of record, you're acting as if this is something you sold, right? You're taking that level of responsibility. I want to freaking know what's sold. So that's the bar anyways that we're setting, right? That we see is we want to know what you just said. What did this to sell on Shopify? Did it sell on eBay? How much did it sell for? Are you being honest? Because the majority of people are, when they do, guess what? CBP will know that they're good. And then the ones that aren't, they're going to know. Or we're going to be able to fix the entry, do reasonable care as a broker, properly classify it, and do all of those things.
And the best benefit of it all is all of these good actors are going to have a great experience.
Yep.
And everything's going to clear, and their stuff's not going to be
Why
held
is their
in
experience
cages.
great, right? So what are now the things that could be provided to a foreign seller that was super hard before, that's going to make their lives easier?
Well, if
I look in an environment like this,
I can't even tell you. So before I came to Zonos, I worked for a retailer, right? And my international was my baby, and compliance and all the right information to be able to transmit to. I'm working directly with the commercial carriers that I'm working with. It's a pain in the butt. And it's a lot of manual back and forth and getting the right data together, working. I mean, it was a lot of work. And there's a ton of technology out there now that we can leverage to be able to make my life a whole lot easier than what it was 10 years ago. And I could connect my store, understand get questions and update information ahead of time before I ship. And then my stuff just moves.
Yeah.
And my stuff clears and it delivers, and it's super simple and it's seamless.
If you have something that's PGA, what's your experience going to be like, right? Partner government authority, it's going to go through a, what could your experience be like in a
Yeah, so let's say I have a store or a marketplace account or whatever. I can connect it, pull down my listings or my catalog. Anything that needs extra information, I get asked real quick, stores it against my catalog, and now when that good ships, it all clears. All the information's there.
Yeah, because now us as a broker, it's like they didn't have to do anything, even if the data didn't get passed through. So here's why we're talking about this, and I think some of the audience might not know this, but if they don't, we do so much of the postal volume into the United States, and so we're trying to find what you just said is like, how do we help those businesses that are doing this right continue to do it correctly and make it easier and better, and even possibly save on tariffs if they can actually apply a free trade agreement, or get the benefit of things that sometimes brokers will say, I won't even touch it because they know they don't have the info. We're going to be able to handle all sorts of customers with this type of technology at scale and feel comfortable, because I'm the importer record. Again, I need to know these things if I'm the seller, and we're going to find a lot of this out and just make everybody's lives a whole lot easier.
And this is where I think it's important to understand. We're coming at this we need to keep as much volume moving as we can for all of our partners, because we care. And we know what's coming because we're working with other partners to solve massive problems with caging and other things that are happening on the commercial side of things that already have like a type 11 entry and things happening, which is what's coming to postal. we're already innovating with them to solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
And you know what the top couple problems are related to PGA data, bad descriptions. What kind of things are prevalent in postal stream, right? So it's like, okay, we can't just sit on our heels and just hope this works.
No.
It's like we need to innovate and make this work, so things aren't just getting held up.
The reality is, and it's I am sensitive to how difficult this is for foreign postal operators, because they haven't had to have something ever be entered into ACE.
Right.
Once it starts getting entered.
What's ACE?
Okay, ACE is the government's, it's their system where you submit the entry, where they track all the entries and how much they're going to get paid, and then they get paid for all those entries from the broker. And so once it's in there, they have now visibility, right?
And
that's what caused them to shut down.
And all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, to put this in perspective, like that broker that got shut down, I would say, actually, I'll ask you this question, Aaron. If they had to be doing type 13 entries with that data a year ago,
oh, yes,
they'd all be out of business.
Yeah.
Because they would either have to block and hold everything so no post office would work with them, or they do entries and say they could do it and they would get shut down.
Yep.
So
which is what we're starting to see now.
This is, yeah. So it's, I am sensitive to the posts. They've never seen this before. And yet we know that there's other carriers that have massive cage. Like post office can't even contemplate what caging is, right? Even possibly the United States Postal Service. They haven't had to deal with it. They don't hold packages. This stuff is going to get stopped. When and how CBP does certain levels of enforcement, it's not about matter of if, it's not. It's a matter of when. And so trying to just help hold the hand of anyone coming to the US, whether it's type 13, which is postal, or type 11, which is commercial, when we do both, our customers, and helping hold their hands so they can be compliant. And then we're now setting a bar that anyone else can meet. It's not like you can't meet this bar. It's funny because right at first I'm like, yeah, we'll be the import of record, right? We're totally going to be able to do this. And every day for the past 3 months, I think I walk in the office and I'm like, Aaron, I'm more nervous than I've ever been. And I should be, right? We built, an amazing company here, and we are going to stay in business. And anyone that rides along and hitches the wagon to us as a broker can rest assured that we're still going to be in business. And so that means we can't bring on bad customers. And it's not even a bad customer. We can't bring on bad shipments is kind of what I'm trying to say, right? Like we can't. It jeopardizes everyone. And so that's what this executive order is about. And guess what? It worked, right? Because CBP is saying, if you're going to do a type 13 entry, you have to be the import of record if you're the broker. So they're now forcing a business like me. I started the company in 2009 to say, all right, now that I have to act like I sold it, what do I need to know? And how do I need to make sure that I feel comfortable and basically do this better than anyone else, so that every day I know that we're going to be in hopefully the good graces, right, of CBP. And look, nobody's perfect. We're not going to be perfect, but we're going to strive for this and try to balance the line of extra effort that we know this is going to be for postal operators and for shippers and individuals, right? We just know this is going to be more difficult. Balance the line of extra work and also not creating a massive liability because you lower your bar and you're like, yeah, sure, I could do it. Anyone can say that. Anyone can say, I'll clear your shipments. But what happens when CBP actually the day comes and they're like, no, this is actually going to be held, right? And then your broker's like, sorry, this has to be held. And by the way, I don't have, how many of the shipments, Aaron, are subject to some type of PGA in postal?
It's close to half that could.
Okay, close to half that could.
You need some sort of information.
So 50%, you're a post office, 50, maybe, let's say it's 40% of your shipments could be subject to that. What if your broker can't answer the questions?
Right.
You need brokers. A lot of times, we were talking to one yesterday. They're like, "Oh yeah, we just don't do PGA."
Oh, yeah. That's actually that's how
they're like. We won't even do it.
And honestly, this is where we're trying to tackle an extremely difficult problem that hasn't been faced before. And it's because it's unique within this environment. Because the typical MO of commercial brokers, commercial carriers, is they're very selective on who they ship with and the type of commodities they clear and they move, because they don't want to deal with some of the crap.
Yep.
The problem is now in this postal environment is you've just got so many parties that obscure the broker from who the shipper is, and even the postal operator that's picking up isn't the same postal operator that's delivering, and there's just a lot less visibility and connection within that, and there's a lot of different types of commodities coming through. So you don't have as much of an intimate connection and relationship with the transaction as the commercial carriers and providers do, and you don't have the same kind of controls on the type of commodities that come through either. And so that's where it's a massive partnership that we are building together with postal operators that is leveraging technology at the forefront to solve it. And I think it's important to point out that the status quo is great, wonderful. Like we can point to the past, but there's actually lessons in history to show that we can actually move into a better world. Mm-hmm. And you talk about one of those examples of how things can change, and it actually turns out to be a really good thing in the long run. Maybe it felt painful when that transition was happening, but now we look at it and we're like, no, this is the way it's just got to be. And that's going back to the banking.
Yeah, the banking.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And how that parallels here?
Know your business, right? So banks, they used to not have to. You could bring on a bad customer. Maybe there's some wire fraud going on, things like that, right? But knowing your customer, and the banking industry went through this whole transition, and I'm sure they went through the phases of grief, right? Because it's going to impact their revenue and everything else. We've all been the better for it. And so because it weeded out bad behaviors.
Absolutely.
And protects everyone. And so in the supply chain and to the other countries that are doing this, right? There are right ways to do this. And I think there's always some things that the US for sure could do better, I would think. And, but I think that we're seeing most every, I think, country kind of agree on the general principle of, I want to hold someone accountable, a declarant, let's say in the EU, right? I'm going to remove the de minimis so people can't skirt duties, the EU, right? So this is not just a US thing. There's a global tide coming, and you're going to want to be on the right side of history here if you're a broker and if you're also a shipper, right? Doing type 11s. This is not a type 13 thing. So I even think that, we didn't talk a lot about it, but I think a lot of these brokers that are doing type 11s today have no idea.
Oh yeah.
What's coming either. They think they haven't needed to know this crap.
Yep.
Right? When something comes in and it's valued, and I've seen it, somebody values something at $1 and they clear it anyway. That's not reasonable care.
In fact, I've heard it mentioned multiple times from CBP that the answer from a broker of, I don't know, that's just the data I got, so I processed it, isn't good enough.
No. They've also said the race to the bottom is over. Because that's been the complaint from the good brokers. There's good brokers out there. There's really good brokers.
Yep.
And they're honest, and they might not be the cheapest. And their complaint for years, when we haven't been a broker, their complaint for years is I can't compete with this because I'm not going to do it wrong. Best news in 1,000 years for them too, right?
Yep.
So, hey, if you're going to be honest and take the extra work to do it right, it's going to be great news. It's going to be good. And then no country wants bad stuff coming in or bad actors. And so they'll get squozing, and the light will be shown right on them because it's going to be very clear the ones that are good.
Yeah, I think it's great. This is an opportunity for all of the compliant, all of the good traders, which I do believe is the majority, to be able to shine a spotlight on them and let them stand out.
It is the majority, for sure. And some don't know, right? You're just shipping a pharmaceutical thing to the US. You might not even think you're doing anything wrong. And yet you list on your website that it's free shipping for Okay, you can't do that for whatever reason, right? And so there's these rules, how do you help them, the good actors, do it right? And then when there's the bad ones, those are the ones that will get.
They'll stick out like a sore thumb.
They will.
So, no, this is fantastic. Thank you very much. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I just say it's titled "The Reckoning is Coming for a Reason," and it will. It might be a little bit painful, but the end result is going to be better for almost everyone, and it's going to be global at some point, and the ball's already rolling. So anyway, I'm looking forward to actually having more deeper conversations. We used to do these podcasts all the time. So, hey, a little teaser what's coming, right? So Aaron and I will be doing a little bit more. Oh, we say that every time, and then you guys will see us in 3 months. No, but we like to go into the details, whether it's, around just what is a PGA, right? Like, what is that? What is type 11 versus type 13? Or, we have a lot of great podcasts on, brokerage fees that carriers charge and things like that. And so there's, I think, just more education. I think it's time to jump back in the seat, Aaron. So I'm committing you to some more podcasts. And looking forward to the next time on the podcast with you.
Sign me up. Let's do it.
Okay, see ya.